Okay, so it's a beautiful Sunday morning. Looking like Chris has been in here. Wires everywhere, tools kind of everywhere. I think he's in the middle of a job here, but he's not here. And I am, so I'm going to start a second project and leave that one alone. Not that wiring is a Chris project anyway, but I'll leave him to that one. I'm going to see what we can do with the transmission tunnel. So you'll notice the ZF takes up quite a lot more room than the original Land Rover gearbox. So we'd like to cover that in the tidiest way possible, while leaving obviously gaps for the standard gear lever, the low box and the diff lock levers on the right hand side. I think we're just going to use some mild, I'll cut some out of that sheet over there, see what we can come up with, and then I think Chris is going to just put some of that adhesive carpet stuff like that's in the footwell right over, and it should just sort of look fairly standard. You'll notice we've already had to trim the floorboards slightly, this side only a little bit, other side more so, just because of the things that got in the way, and also the footwell itself has had to have quite a modification there to accommodate the starter on the bow housing. Anyway, let's see what we can do. Right, cardboard mock-up. That one sits basically in on top of everything. If I can get it in there now to show you, something like that. Leaving enough overlap. I've had to add a bit on the end of the bit of cardboard, it's not big enough. That gives you clearance for those levers, so I have to get some kind of brush gaiter for that. This hole will need making bigger, obviously. That's going to hopefully incorporate the original Land Rover gear gaiter. Cut out on the right hand side for the handbrake, and that piece there is roughly the right size, so what I'll do now is I'll mark that out on a sheet of steel and cut it out. Okay, so I've got a sheet of steel here. I'm going to cut this out the corner. You can see I've made some marks. Ideally we'll cut it with a plasma cutter, but I can't really be bothered to actually make up all the straight edges to follow. If you don't set a straight edge to follow with a plasma cutter, it's almost impossible to get a straight edge. For the size of this, I think I'm probably just going to cut it with a grinder. That'll be easier. There we go. Right, there we go. There's the top bit in position, roughly. So it's a nice tight fit between the bulkhead and the floor pan where the seats sit. Only a rough cut there where the two levers stick out and the gear stick. That'll need a bit more precision feathering at some point. It's just so it sits there for a minute. Now we're going to step down the sides. So this side here, there's going to be two. There's going to be a little bit more there, and it's going to step out and then come back, just to clear the air intake on the slave cylinder there. And then the other side is there's a sort of a bigger alteration because we've had to go around the handbrake, but I've got to go full width because the transmission is quite wide at the front. So there we go. Right, I've added some angles to the sides. It didn't need to be flat right across the top, and it kind of looked a bit silly because it was so wide. So I've just slitted and angled down the two edge pieces there now. Same on both sides, slightly less on the other side just because of the handbrake and the clearance, but this side I've tapered down quite steep, and then it will drop vertical from there to the floor. Looks like we got some guests in the workshop. I got a bird here coming in and out, feeding these little hungry mouths up here. I can't get close enough because my microphone is grounding out on me. But there's, well, 3 or 4 of them in there. Right, so that's this side sort of tacked in. You see I just had to step back at the back to accommodate that slave cylinder. It's only tacked at the moment. The only thing I've got left to do now is just to weld a 1/2 inch strip all along the bottom, of which I'm going to drill some holes in, and that's what's going to then bolt it to the floor. The only thing is I need to see if this is still removable like this, or whether we're going to have to split the side along that crease line and have a join there. I didn't really want to have a join there, but we might have to, such as things are. There you go, that's the passenger side, just, well, all welded along the seams. Just tested fitting it, that still drops in easily. So I've decided this side's going to be permanent, fixed all the time. All I've got left just to do there now is weld that strip I said about on the bottom to bolt it in. And then what I'm thinking is the other side will actually have to unbolt and bolt on to separately, because there's no way you'll be able to fit this otherwise. It's one huge great unit. There she sits. Passenger side transmission tunnel complete. I've obviously managed to get away with keeping that as one, which is actually really good. I didn't want to have to split that in 2 places, so that whole thing that you can see there now comes out as one piece of steel, and it actually comes in and out quite easily. Just trimmed up the interior a bit there to fit around it. I think Chris is going to either put some matting over it or some carpet or something eventually to tidy that up.
I don't know, she's looking that pretty now, I might leave it.
Just leave it as she is. So I've welded this piece of plate all around the bottom. You can see that's going to bolt it to the floor. So what we'll do is on the final assembly we'll just put you know, some silicone or whatever like on the original floor, just to make a seal there and bolt it all down tight. The gear lever is on the top, as you can see, so what I'm thinking we're going to do there is use I've cut the gator out of the factory Land Rover, so that's going to sit something like that. What I'll do is I'll drill some holes in the frame, weld some captive nuts behind it, and then we'll just put some sort of 6 screws around the outside of it to screw that on, so that can be then, you can put the gear lever on and then screw that down afterwards. We'll have to get some kind of custom gator here for these 2 levers at the front here. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do. Maybe some brush gators or something just to cover that hole. But now we've got the challenge of doing the driver's side, which is going to be great fun. And there be the driver's side. Almost finished, and the welder ran out of wire on me. I haven't got another roll here, so we're going to have to abandon that now. Basically, the front piece, which you can't see, that's actually welded solid to the Land Rover, just to complete the footwell. And then from there down, is all part of the transmission tunnel, which is removable. We had to go on a bit of a funny angulation around the handbrake lever there, but he's all welded up solid there. I just ran out towards the end just to finish putting in this base plate to screw it down. Then there's a joint that runs down there, so I'm going to have a piece of flat welded on one of them behind it with some threaded holes, so that you'll be able to bolt one to the other and bolt it all up secure. If we actually have a thin bar all the way along, we'll be able to just put a bead of sealant along it and snug it down just so that's sealed. But we ran out of wire, so that's put a bit of a stop to that project for the day. I might have a look at the gear gator, possibly, but I'm pretty pleased with it otherwise. Chris is still working on wiring, all sorts of shenanigans going on
here. I should point out, wiring is not normally a department Chris deals with. Just up here doing some wiring. Got much as we can done there. Well, that's the new bin, is it, Chris?
Wow, James cleans them, isn't he?
Oh, alright. Well, it's quite a big bin. I reckon we can fill that bin up in about 3 years of sitting here throwing crap down there. I'm sure James will most appreciate it.
Well, Ruin put half a gallon of oil in there the other day.
Alright. We got all the wiring. We're kind of converting this new cubby hole area here. We've put this kit in with a new dash front on it, so it's giving us a nice gap behind there, so we're using it as like a wiring centre. There we go. So Chris has got his gauges in there, air pressure, boost, engine RPM, and then we're going to have some nice quality switches here, look, and indicator lights for various functions around the Land Rover, instead of having kind of random coloured switches just dotted around the dash. Not really a clue what any of them do. So that's going to look a lot
like
better.
that one?
Yeah, like that one, just everywhere. So that's really going to tell. It means everything's in one place, and the wiring is actually. Chris has been labelling everything, and it's all new wire. So, and everything's got joins, so you can just take that out, or you can just take the roof off. Everything's terminated here for the roof. Everything's terminated there for the dash. We've already done that with the engine, so that's all terminated. We've just got a few extra wires to run up from sensors and stuff, and a bit of a tidy up, and then that bit can go on. The original Land Rover fuse box is still down the bottom there. Amazingly, I think we're going to be able to actually put the OEM fuse box cover on. We might just have to trim the bottom slightly, but that should bolt on there on top of the new tranny housing, transmission tunnel. It should look fairly okay, but we still got a bit of a lack of drive, so we're stuck over the pit for another week while we wait for the input shaft. Right, you may remember a while ago, well, fairly early on, where we actually got it running. A few people brought up the problem that we may run into with the system we were connected up with regarding the batteries. So as you know, this is a 24 volt start, well, originally, and it still is now. We really wanted to keep it that way anyway. It's meant to be 24 volt. It means that you can kind of use a more suitable size cable, keep the amps down a bit to the starter. But either way, we were stuck with the 24 volt starter anyway, because we can't get a 12 volt one which fits our ring gear, and we did not fancy dropping the transmission, especially as we wanted to keep it 24 volt. So to get around the problem that we are probably going to have, whereby we were basically running 24 volt charge and start, and just taking a 12 volt tap between the batteries, as someone quite correctly pointed out in the video, which we do actually sort of see now, is that the second battery, because obviously nothing's actually draining it, will actually prevent the other battery from charging, because it won't allow enough amps to go through. So that system, although it would have worked in theory, if you put any load on the system, like all of Chris's lights, etc., it would have eventually drained the battery, and it would have killed the batteries as well. So we've got around that by using one of these, well, big shunt relay jobs, sort of a 1224 crossover. So effectively, it's a 12 volt Land Rover in every sense. It's a 12 volt alternator. The batteries are in parallel, and all that relay does effectively is, when you turn the key to crank, is it crosses the batteries into series, gives the start at 24 volt, literally only while it's in the crank position, and as soon as you lift off the key, it drops the relay back out 12 volt, and the batteries go back to charging under 12 volt. So it effectively just 24 volt starts it, and then the rest of the time it's parallel 12 volt. And we've managed to, well, Chris has actually put that in there, bolted it to the back of the battery tray, so it's all nice and in the dry. So you've got the 12 volt feed coming in the back, the alternator feed coming in. We've got the two coil wires down the bottom, so that's what your key activates. We've got the wire to the starter, the 24 volt feed, and the grounds. And that seems to work quite well. We've just tested it, everything's happy, so we've got ideal best of both worlds. Sort of kept things 12 volt, but we've managed to keep the 24 volt start, which I think is probably the best way to go. Okay, there's been some wiring going this evening. We've ran all actually genuinely new cable, and we've got a few spools of different colours. Chris bought it just for the job, so that is actually quite good. So we've ran all the new wires up the front for all the ancillaries, all the sensors. We've replaced most of the alternator and starting wiring, given it a nice tidy up at the back there. Chris has labelled everything that comes into the dash area with labels so we know what's going on. So really that's kind of all going to need wiring up and sorting out. Otherwise, that's going to be it for today. It's Sunday and it's like 9:30, and we've had enough. We've been working on it all day, so it's actually been a pretty productive day, I think. Another evening on the Land Rover today. Here's the transfer box. So we've got the input gear back in the transfer box here tonight. Really simple, it just drops straight in the side. I've just bolted up the PTO cover just temporarily to hold that bearing up tight, so while we refit this to the Land Rover. Once it's refitted, I'll have to take that cover off and torque up the centre nut and then seal the cover back on again. So our next job is get this back in the Land Rover, and Chris isn't here at the moment, and I'm keen to get on, so I'm going to attempt it by myself, which could be interesting because the splines are a bit tight because it's the second time this one's been welded. And it's back on. That was a little bit tricky, but she's slid back on and snugged up tight. So I've just put the other gearbox mount back on. Still need to tighten that up. So I need to take that PTO cover off, snug up the centre bolt, re-seal the cover, bolt that back. Again, put the prop shafts on, hook up the diff lock and the low box levers and linkages and things, put some oil in it, and that should be that part of the job done.
Right, not sure where the last video ended off, so we're probably going to do a massive jump again. Transfer box is on, all bolted up, whatnot, with the new gear. Darren just finished the transfer box cover, all looking very good. We just need to get some bolts to bolt it down there. We're going to get some of those riv nuts so we can rivet in the nuts into the floor plate, and then whenever we're taking it in and out, we can do it single person without having to hold a nut underneath. Center console is all wired. It looks like an absolute mess at the moment. It's probably because it is. And it's ready for the console, which is just over there to go in. So that's tomorrow morning's job, is just to bung that in and give it a little test. We've got a few bits of trim and whatnot to put back on. Then the next job would be to take her out and put the roof on, I suppose. The bonnet's ready. Bonnet can go on now. All the wiring in here is all done. The rad fan's all wired up. All the sensors for the gauges. There's a boost gauge there. That's all wired up. So it's just a case of plug all the gauges into the sensors at the console. We've got a nice little list on the go here, the to-do list, and that's it. Fluid in the transfer box. She drives. Already just moving forward and back on the pit here, I can notice a massive difference in the gear ratios. So ready to take her out for a quick burnabout really, but the weather is absolutely crap and it's not really best to do with no roof.